so in this game, we're going to take a look at how would you solve a game when it's instead of a simultaneous move game, it's a sequential move game. In other words, one of the players gets to move first, and then the other one gets to react. And they get to see what the first player chose, and they get to react to it. Okay? And so here we have it's a pricing game. So you've got Apple and Dell competing on laptops, and again, we're going to keep it simple and just say they've got two price points. Apple's decision is whether to charge $1,000 or $800 for the laptop, okay? And then Dell's decision is actually for them it's an entry game, right? So for Apple, they decide on the price first, right? So they know they're in the market either way. They're going to choose how much to charge, and then based on what Apple chooses, what they set for the price of their laptops, then Dell is going to decide whether they even want to enter this market and compete against Apple. Okay? So we have here what we call a game tree. Okay? And so here is the first decision node. Right? So Apple decides to charge $1,000 or $800. So this branch, the upper branch, this is where we go if Apple charges $1,000. The lower branch is what's going to, all the outcomes might be if Apple charges $800. So in the next set of nodes here, what we have is then it's Dell's turn, and they're choosing whether to enter or not. And it's the same choice either way. Regardless of what Apple's choosing for their price, Dell's choice is enter or not enter. And so then we get further branching depending on what Dell decides to do. And so then if they enter, we have this highest branch, and then here are the outcomes in this last column or last, right? It's no longer a decision node. Just these are our outcomes or our payoffs, right? So just like we had with the simultaneous games, everything in the end, we need to have our payoffs, right? So notice that the basic concepts are still the same. We have to define the players. We have to define what their moves are, right? So for Apple, it's the pricing. For Dell, it's whether to enter the market or not. And then in the end, we have to have the payoffs. Now, in this particular game, what we're saying is that in order for Dell to enter the market, to make that investment, they need a rate of return that's at least 16%, or at least 15%, actually. So let's say, so is that at least 16 or at least 15? We can actually set the cutoff at 10%, wouldn't matter. So here are the four possible outcomes. So how do we go ahead and solve a sequential game? Well, we start at the end. Okay? And so we can go ahead and take this scenario, right, the top half of our game tree. So this is the case where Apple charges $1,000, so that Dell is operating up here. Well, if they enter, then they're going to make a return of 16%, as will Apple. Okay? So Apple and Dell would both make a return of 16%. If they don't enter, okay, then what is going to happen? If they don't enter, then of course Dell's return is zero, right? If you don't enter the market, you can't get any kind of return. And Apple's rate of return would be 30% because they're going to capture the market all by themselves while charging this higher price. Right? So when you're looking at this, then we can say, well, it's very clear, right, what Dell would choose, right? They would choose the 16% over nothing, right? Because they're covering, right, the minimum. We said 16, 15, 10%, right? Saying as long as they get at least this payoff, they would choose to enter. So we know we can cross this one off, right? And so we know they would choose to enter in this case. What about the scenario where Apple charges the lower price, right? They're more aggressive in their pricing, charge $800 per laptop. Now, in this case, if Dell enters the market, the rate of return is only 5%, which is not enough to justify the investment. So they would actually stay out of the market, be down here. So now what we've done is actually we've simplified this from Apple's perspective. Apple now, right, they know how Dell is going to respond in each case. And so really what they're choosing is between this outcome or this outcome. And all we have to do is compare Apple's rate, right, their return. right? So by charging the lower price, Apple can get a larger return because they're keeping Dell out of the market. So in this case, we would end up here. Right? Apple knows how Dell is going to respond in each case, and they would end up choosing to be lower price, more competitive pricing, keep Dell out of the market. So even though they're going to get lower markups, lower margins on each laptop they sell, by capturing the market all by themselves, they'll sell more laptops and earn a greater return overall. Okay? So this is how you'd solve these sequential games. Now, of course, we're making the assumption here that each player knows the payoffs, not just to themselves, but to the other players as well. And then Dell might have some ways of trying to get around this kind of scenario. And so we're going to be able in class to talk about things like commitment mechanisms. Is there a way for Dell to try to change the outcomes in the end by committing up front to entering the market, by making some initial investment? And so that would be a way for the second mover to eliminate what we have here, which is a first mover advantage, right? This is an example of a first mover advantage for Apple, because by moving first and charging that lower price, they can keep the competition at bay, keep them out of the market. So are there ways strategically that Dell could try to counter that by trying to affect the payoffs? Right? And we'll talk about that in class.